Hey everyone, and welcome back to the We Rising Suns podcast. Welcome back to the show. Welcome back to another episode. I'm your host, Raymond Logan, and today's show is a very much last minute idea that I had. I was kind of just sitting around and I was preparing my next episode, and while I was preparing my next episode, I just had this idea, and it kind of almost went against what my next episode was all about. I was talking about fatherhood and all the bad things that came from father absence and men not stepping up and leading, becoming fathers and everything. And then all of a sudden I was just like, wait, what if all the problems in our world today with our children and them not being raised right and them not growing up and all this anxiety and everything, what if it's not all father's fault? What if that's not all a father's? Maybe what if that's not all because of father absence in the home? Yes, it plays a big role in it, but like, what if there's a different factor into it? And so I really want to talk a little bit about that because it was really interesting when I was writing this stuff out and I was thinking about it. So yeah, before I get into today's episode though, I want to say that I'm doing a cross promotion with another podcast through my hosting site, Red Circle, which is really nice. Essentially, they have this set up to where you can ask another podcast to promote your podcast on their podcast, and then you will promote their podcast and play like a little clip or something on your podcast, which is really nice, especially for me, which is just, I'm starting out. I'm a smaller podcast. I don't have many listeners and everything. If he puts that on his podcast, his listeners will hear the purpose and the message that I want to spread with this podcast and helping men and everything like that. So that's really cool what Red Circle is doing. And I think it's a big step that a lot of platforms don't have. And the podcast that I'm working with right now is called 1 Minute Motivation. They essentially just put like short episodes out, just like 1 minute or so. Just very motivating. If you guys want to check it out, look him up on YouTube. He's there. I listen to a lot of his stuff. His stuff is really good. He has a good fan base and a good listener base. So definitely go give him a follow. And I'll give you guys his Instagram if you guys want to follow him on Instagram. He's really cool. So give him a follow up on there. His Instagram is 1 minute motivation _. And yeah, he's really cool. Go check him out. But I'm going to play his little clip really quick, and then we'll get right into the episode.
1 Minute Motivation is an one-stop destination for high-quality podcast and motivational videos. We create content to instigate and impact your souls to push forward. Our aim is to create a positive mentality in your minds in just 1 minute. We value time, as it waits for none. Check out our podcast and videos to get motivated and become relentless. Follow us on Instagram at 1 minute motivation _.
So that was 1 minute motivation. If you guys aren't already motivated, go listen to his stuff, and then you will be most definitely motivated. Go get some, as Jocko Willink would say. Today's episode number, I think this is episode number 8. Just a second, let me check. Yep, this is episode number 8. Man, I know it doesn't seem like a lot, but for me, that's like a big milestone. It really is, especially from me going from the first episode. And then I essentially wanted to quit after that first episode. And I was like, man, this is terrible. And I got really, really discouraged about it. But then I just kept going on. And now people are reaching out and telling me, whoa, man, your stuff is amazing. And it's really helping me. You got a lot of good insight and everything. They're always super amazed that I'm 16. I'm just like, oh, thank you. And yeah, it's cool. Like, for me, this means a lot. It's something that I've always wanted to do, always wanted to help men to become better and to step up and to become more of a man than they ever thought they could be. So this means a lot. So to all those who are supporting me and who have reached out or who listen to this podcast, I just want to let you guys know that I really, really, really do appreciate this and what you guys do. Even though I know I don't got a lot of followers and a lot of listeners, it really does make me feel like I'm actually doing something and really helping those who may need this help and this insight. So yeah, I appreciate it. So in this episode, essentially, I want to talk about, when does it stop becoming a man's fault that their child is not being raised right, or they have all this depression and they're running with gangs and everything like that? When does it stop becoming their fault and it starts becoming our fault? And this kind of sounds weird, but I'm going to go into the backstory of how I stumbled across this. This is even just like yesterday. I was writing this stuff out, and I just thought about it. I was like, man, like, that sounds like a really good, interesting topic. And so I just want to share that with you guys. So yesterday, as usual, I was planning out my next episodes. I was writing stuff down. I was making notes, and I had a really good structured episode. It was on fatherhood, and I was going to talk about father absence and men needing to step up and start becoming fathers and raising their children and everything. And as I was writing this stuff down, and I was listing all the cons of father absence and all of the, bad things and everything. And I want to let you guys know that there is some material when you're podcasting, especially for me in this, genre, not necessarily genre, but topics that I talk about masculinity and becoming a man, that you just kind of just eat up, and it's just candy for you. And one of the episodes that you're going to see on almost every single podcast about men and masculinity and leadership and everything is going to be father absence. It's going to be the need for fatherhood. It's going to be why children need fathers and all the stuff about fatherhood and the pros and cons and everything like that. And I thought, hey, maybe I'll make an episode like that. And all these other podcasts are doing it. I might as well make an episode about it. And I'd always listen to this one woman. I don't know if she's a politician or not, but Candace Owens. She's really bright. She's amazing. Hope she runs for president one day. But she'd always talk about the need for fatherhood and the problem with father absence. She'd go through all the statistics and everything like that. And that always intrigued me. It always interested me. And I always wanted to make an episode on it. So I was preparing this episode. I was like, man, I'm finally doing this. This has been really big for me. And as I was preparing this episode, I was kind of just, I don't know. I kind of felt like I was maybe sending the message at the wrong time for the wrong reason. I was kind of doing it as like all these other podcasts are talking about it. I might as well talk about it too, as instead of the reason that I'm here to spread the message on why we need fatherhood and why we need real fatherhood and we need men to step up. And I'm still going to talk about the episode and I'm still going to talk about this topic and everything. I just felt like the time wasn't really ready for that yet. And instead, I had kind of came across this other episode idea, and it was about, maybe it's not all fathers' faults. When does it stop becoming their fault and start becoming our fault? And what I mean by this is, think about this for a second. Yes, when a father leaves and runs off and refuses to take care of his kids and whatnot, that's really bad, and it's really bad for society. And we've seen the effects of this for many years now. It's just getting worse and worse and worse, and it's not getting better. But as we know from statistics and studies and just from what we've seen from over the years, in the development of the child isn't as great as it would be as if there were a father there. And one of my friends was talking about, he had pointed this out, and he said that a kid needs his mother, really, really needs his mother from when he's born until age 10. And that doesn't mean that he doesn't need his mother at all, because mother add a lot of value to a kid and really making that kid whole and teaching a lot of value and whatnot. But said that a child needs his mother until he or she is about 10. And after that, a child really needs his father, because that kid is going to really look up to the father. And a father has so much impact on a child. It's crazy. And without the father, actually, there is so many statistics. I mean, you guys should look this up. Look up statistics on father absence in a home, or just father absence in general. You'll see the terrible things. I mean, I don't know if it's probably greater than this now, but this is a few years ago when Candace Owens was talking about this. She has said, like, a teen is so many, I don't really know the specific number, but this teen is so many times more likely to end up in jail or run with gangs if he didn't have a father in the home. Or teen pregnancies. I for sure know that number has increased from the last time I listened to that episode. And father absence also contributes to a lot of anxiety and depression and suicide and everything like that. So much. It's crazy how removing one element from society can cause an entire collapse. It is crazy. And our society needs fathers, and our societies need men right now. I mean, we need it more than ever. We need men who are actually willing to speak out against all the crazy things that's going on right now. We need them more than ever. And we need fathers more than ever too. Children want fathers. Women want good husbands. They want fathers in the home. They need it too. Our society needs it really more than anyone, honestly. But anyways, as I was writing this stuff down, I was writing down statistics and everything. It kind of came to me that what if this is not all a father's fault? What if the increase in kids more likely to end up in more jail, the increase in suicides, the increase in anxiety and depression and teen pregnancies isn't all a father's fault? Yes, it's going to be a majority of his fault, but what if it isn't all of his fault? And when does it stop becoming his fault and start becoming our fault? When does it stop becoming his fault and our fault as a society? Because think about this. If a father is not in the home and a mother has to work, she has to drop her kids off at school and she has to go and work 12, however many hours. She's probably not home a lot. She's probably working overtime and taking up different shifts and working different jobs, and she has to maybe leave her kid at a daycare and she has to leave her kids at school. So she can't really be there for her kid. Okay. And I know that this is kind of like an older thing that was maybe more so back in the day, even just reading from my history and everything, how a community would help form a child. And I think personally that it was really interesting on how a community would help raise a child who maybe didn't have a father or a mother, how they would kind of take him or her in and help her, whatever it is, academically, spiritually, physically, maybe give her some help, provide some education or some money or anything that they would really need. Like communities used to actually really do this and really would go out of their way to really help this kid or this unfortunate family. But I was thinking, who is supposed to help raise this child if a mother can't be there because she's working a million different jobs or a million different shifts a week? And if the father's not there, if he's just abandoned, like who is supposed to help raise this kid? And as I was thinking about this, I was brainstorming, I was trying to come up with different ideas and everything like that. And one just kind of just came out of nowhere and it made so much more sense. I said, well, if the father isn't there and if the mother isn't there, then shouldn't the community help raise this child? Shouldn't the community come together? And I don't mean like literally come together and help raise this child. Like, oh, we're going to come, we're going to find that child who really needs help. But like schools, they're supposed to help a kid, are supposed to help kids be academically smart. You send your kid to school to learn about math, science, and all the other stuff. But our schools are so terrible now that I wouldn't want to send my kid to a school if I know that they weren't going to be learning anything worthwhile. I mean, if we just sit in class all day and talk about who's racist and who's not, and we go canceling random people like Aunt Jemima all day and saying math is racist, like, I don't want to send my schools to that. I want them to get a good education. Churches are supposed to help kids spiritually. But so many churches these days are not deep rooted in their faith or in their belief system. There are literally churches out there that literally change their belief system every single year to whoever the head of that church believes. They literally have this council and they come together and they say, oh, what should we believe this year? Like that doesn't show me that you're very deep rooted in your faith or in your belief. Like, I don't want to send my kid one day who says marijuana is bad and smoking is terrible for your lungs and will give you lung cancer, and then the next year comes back and says marijuana is great, it's amazing, it'll make you young and beautiful and die slowly. Like, I don't want that. I want a church that says this is bad, this is good, that speaks truth regardless of what the world says and what our culture says, that will help this kid spiritually. Like, this is the duty of a church, supposed to help this kid reach an ultimate goal, which is heaven, of course. But if our own churches can't even figure out what their faith is and what they're going to believe, then I don't want to send my kids to church. Of course not. I don't want to do that. If that option is gone, if we don't have churches and we don't have school, if we can't teach our kids academically, bring them up and teach them right history, true history, not woke history, then what is there for them to learn in the schools? And if churches can't even figure out what the heck they want to believe this year, then I don't want to send my kid to a church that's going to change their belief every single year. that doesn't have a set moral value. And there are so many things and so many programs that are supposed to help a child, really, but they're all now woke and they're all now broken and they're all now different and they're just so terrible and they're so corrupted that I don't want to send my kids there. If we send our kid into a corrupted system, they're going to come out of it corrupted. That's just a simple truth. You can't send a kid into a pack of hyenas and expect him to come out on the other side unscathed or just uninjured whatsoever. You can't. And if a father isn't there to help raise the child and help develop the child, then who is? And that should be the community. But if the world's so corrupt and the communities are so corrupt, then I don't want to send my kids there. So who's there to raise the child? Who's there to help? I mean, no one really. But there's no father. So you kind of have to send him into the pack of hyenas. And that's just terrifying, honestly. Our kids coming out of the other side, just a totally different. So can we blame father absence for everything that's wrong with the child? I'd say absolutely not. I'd say it's unfair if we do. Because yes, as we know, father absence has such a big negative impact on a child, on the development of a child, not only just psychologically, but also spiritually. There's so many different problems. And again, look up the statistics on this. But you also have to ask the question of how much as a society have we added to the negative impact on that child? Because there are so many things that this world in our societies and our communities are trying to push that is evil. This indoctrination is evil. They really are. But you can see how much of a negative impact this indoctrination would have on a child. It's evil stuff that some of the things and some of the agendas that they're trying to push is evil. And that's what we're teaching in our schools. No wonder why our schools are just trash. That's what we're teaching in politics and whatever. Like, teach real wholesome truth. Stop trying to teach all this stupid agendas and all these stupid things. Like, what even is half this shit that they even talk about? These stupid things that I'm convinced that they don't even understand. Some of them don't even make sense, but whatever. Some of this stuff is crazy. So we blame fathers for a lot of the things that happen to children, and majority of it, yes, I believe, but the other half, I'd say almost greater now, is our fault. I mean, how many negative things and terrible indoctrinations that our society has contributed to all the problems that a child without a father already has. I mean, how many more things do we need to stack on top of that plate before it just falls over, before it overflows? So at what point does it stop becoming the father's fault and our fault as a society and as a community? I'd say really it started becoming our fault when we started trying to push this agenda, when our standards and everything has just dropped. When we had set the bar so low that you can't even find it anymore. There is no, I guess I can't say there is no standard. The standard now is kind of twisted and it's not a reality. It's just this imagination and this idea that the world has for everyone. I think that it started becoming our fault when we started letting this toxic indoctrination get into our school systems and into our churches too. Like, that's when it started becoming our fault. I mean, this toxic indoctrination is around us everywhere. You almost can't get a break from it. It's in the media. It's in our churches. It's in our politics. It's in our schools. It's just, we're surrounded by it and we just can't get a break from it. And if we put our kids into that toxic atmosphere, they're breathing in all that toxic air. They're listening to all those toxic words and all those toxic things. They're taking that in with their eyes. And what does that have an impact on them? It makes them toxic too. If you breathe in toxic air, it's kind of like that one thing, who and what you surround yourself with is who and what you become. That's why they always say choose your friends wisely, because the friends that you surround yourself with is the person that you become. And really, I think that it's about time that we started taking, in a way, ownership and taking steps to help these kids. You know, for so long, we've kind of just blamed the father. And I'm not saying that we should let him off the hook or anything. I still think that he has a lot of responsibility. He has to take a lot of ownership for this. But for so long, we've just read the statistics and never really done anything about it. Like, when are we going to actually start doing something about it? When are we going to actually start helping these kids? When are we going to start actually fighting this indoctrination? When are we going to actually start trying to fix our schools and our churches? Like, when are we going to start doing that? I mean, you'd be surprised the things that we could do for kids if we had actually started trying to restore those things. If we actually started trying to raise the bar instead of just kicking it around. If we actually started trying to restore our values, our traditions, what our country was built on. If we actually started trying to restore those things, we could help. I mean, if we actually started trying to do those things, we could actually start restoring our communities and our societies. We could actually start restoring our politics, our government, our churches. We could actually start trying. We could actually start restoring those things. And I'm just kind of sick and tired of just us just kind of blaming Father Absence for the underdevelopment of a child, physically, mentally, spiritually, whatever it is. I'm just sick and tired of that. I mean, we see the statistics, we see them, but yet we do nothing about them. Like, what can you do as an individual? It may just be you as an individual, but what can you do as an individual to help lower those percentages, those numbers? What can you do as an individual to keep children out of jail, to keep teen pregnancies down? What can you do to keep these kids out of jail, out of prison, out of gangs? What can you do? And if you have other people with you who are willing to want to do those things too, then start a community. Start up different programs, start up new programs to start replacing the old corrupted woke ones. I mean, we really do need to start creating new programs. We do actually need to start trying to fix our schools. The schools are very important. School is very important. I don't like school, but I realize the importance and the value of it. And I can see how in a person who's just learning all this shit in school is not learning, retaining, or holding anything that is worth any value. If we actually started speaking out against the stupid things that they're teaching in our schools, then we may actually be able to get somewhere. If we actually started speaking out against the churches who aren't really deep-rooted in their faith and in their beliefs, then we may actually get somewhere. We could start building a more wholesome community. That's kind of what I'm trying to do here with my podcast. You know, my whole envision of it wasn't just a podcast. I want to start building a community with it too. Like I said in the podcast trailer, I want to build and foster a community of brothers around the idea this culture was built on. We will fight the toxic indoctrination that surrounds us and fight to protect the American culture of our forefathers. We will work to better ourselves today so that the boys we were yesterday are eclipsed by the men we're becoming. And this podcast really is for young men who are looking to become better men, who are maybe at the point of their life that now it's time for them to start stepping up and becoming men. We don't know what's the first step and what's the right step to take. This podcast is to help lead them, to help guide them along that journey, to help them build discipline, take ownership, and be a better man, to be the best man they ever could be. This is what I'm doing on my part to help lower those numbers, to help lower those percentages. And yes, I know that I have to do more than just a podcast, but this is just where I'm starting out. I do have a bigger envision for this. Like I said, I want to start building a community. And I know I'm going to have to do more than this podcast, if I actually really want to start changing and reforming and reshaping our communities. I know I'm going to have to do more than just talk behind a microphone. But for right now, this is what I'm doing to help. You should ask yourself, what are you doing to help? What are you doing to help your community, to help those who are less fortunate than you? What are you doing for those kids that don't have a father in the home? What are you doing in your schools to stop this toxic indoctrination? What are you doing right now, or what are you going to do? And if you're doing something right now, what more could you do? It's time that we stop just brushing this matter out of the way. And it's time that we start picking up and taking ownership of it. Problems don't get solved by avoiding them. They get solved when we take steps to solve them, to fix them. As always, I want to thank you guys for listening to this episode, listening to this podcast, for supporting this podcast. If you guys want to know what you could do more of to help support this podcast, you guys can support us on our socials accounts. You guys can support us on Facebook. I did create a private group on Facebook, so just look up We Rising Suns and then click groups, and then we should pop up. You guys can also join us. You can also join us on Facebook on our blog page too, on our personal page. Just look up We Rising Suns. You go to page, and then we should be right there. You guys can also support us on Twitter. Just look us up. I think I've been saying it wrong. It's not We Rising Suns. It's actually just We Rising. So just look us up, We Rising, and you guys can follow us there. You guys can also follow us on our Instagram, just all at We Rising Suns. You guys can also listen to this podcast, stream this podcast on multiple different sites. We are on our main platform, which is our host site, Red Circle. You guys can support us there. You guys can also listen to this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcast, YouTube, and I think it's this new one. I have never heard of it. It's called like Radiohead or something like that. I don't actually know, but that would be, I should put a link in that on our link tree. But you guys can listen to it there. You guys can also join our Patreon. Like I've said, it is free. There's no reason why you shouldn't be joining it. So you guys can all just join us there. I haven't done anything very special. Maybe I'll release this episode early on Patreon to kind of be like, oh, if you're a Patreon member, then you get to listen to this episode a day early. But I haven't decided when we really do for Patreon. I may not even necessarily keep Patreon. I don't know what I'll do. I think some of our socials I think I want to get rid of. I'll probably get rid of Twitter. I'm not a huge Twitter fan. I don't really like Twitter. People kind of use Twitter as, it's just kind of stupid all around. So I'll probably get rid of Twitter. Facebook I'll keep. Instagram I'll keep. But Twitter I think is going to go. So maybe don't join us on Twitter. But other than that, go get after it. Go and see what you can do to help improve your community, to help rebuild your community, to really help those who are less fortunate than you to not have a father in the home. Go see what you can go do. Go know better, be better, and do better. See you guys next time on next episode.